My name is Emma, and I am 62 years old. He threw his mother out of his wedding in front of everyone, never knowing that decision would slowly destroy everything he believed he owned. The wedding hall smelled of flowers and expensive perfume, but to me, it felt suffocating. I stood near a pillar, quietly watching guests admire the decorations, the lights, and the happiness that seemed borrowed rather than real. My son Daniel avoided my eyes all evening, and that silence hurt more than any insult. When he finally shouted for me to leave, his voice wasn't just loud, it was cruel, almost rehearsed, as if he had been waiting for the right moment. People gasped, some looked away, others stared at me with pity. I didn't speak because words would have betrayed the years of discipline I had built inside myself. I simply walked out slowly, every step heavy with memories. Outside, I felt the night air hit my face, sharp and unforgiving. Sitting in my car, I remembered teaching Daniel to walk, holding his hand so he wouldn't fall, staying beside him through every difficult moment. That night, I realized something painful. I had been holding his hand all his life, even when he no longer needed it or wanted it. When I finally reached home, the walls felt closer than ever. I poured myself a glass of water, but I couldn't stop my hands from shaking. Memories flooded my mind without permission. The night Daniel's father died, I promised myself I would be both parents. The years I worked double shifts, coming home exhausted but smiling so he wouldn't feel guilty. The birthdays when I bought one gift for him and none for myself. I had taught him manners, values, and respect, or at least I thought I had. Yet somewhere along the way, Daniel had learned entitlement instead. As dawn approached, I sat on the edge of my bed and finally accepted a painful truth. Sometimes, loving someone too much can teach them the wrong lesson. The phone rang the next morning while I was making tea. It was Daniel. His tone was cold and practical. He said he needed the property papers urgently. Not once did he mention the wedding. Not once did he ask if I was okay. I felt a strange calm settle over me as I listened. When I ended the call, I stared at the cupboard where I kept the documents. Those papers represented decades of sacrifice. I opened the cupboard and ran my fingers over the envelope. Then I closed the door again. That simple act felt like reclaiming a part of myself that I had given away long ago. Later that day, Daniel arrived at my house. His frustration filled the room. He spoke quickly, blaming stress, his wife, the wedding chaos, and everything except himself. I listened. My face remained unreadable. Then I spoke. I told him what it had felt like to stand alone while strangers watched his own mother being humiliated at his wedding. I didn't accuse him. I didn't shout. I simply explained. And somehow, my calmness unsettled him more than anger ever could. When I told him that respect mattered more than inheritance, he laughed bitterly. Then he stormed out. I cried after he left. Not because I regretted my words, but because standing your ground often hurts the most when you are finally doing the right thing. Days turned into weeks. I stopped checking my phone every few minutes, hoping Daniel would call. Instead, I filled my time with things I had postponed for years. Morning walks, old friends, quiet afternoons with books. Slowly, the heaviness in my chest began to lift. Through relatives, I heard that Daniel's marriage was becoming tense. Arguments over money, control, and power became frequent. I stayed silent. I understood that interfering would only delay the lesson life was trying to teach him. One evening, Daniel returned unexpectedly. He looked tired, older somehow. The confidence he once carried so proudly now had cracks running through it. He spoke about sleepless nights, constant fights, and a feeling of emptiness he couldn't explain. I listened without interrupting. Then he asked again about the property. My response was steady, unchanged. I told him that love without respect was simply control disguised as care. This time, he didn't argue. He left quietly, carrying something heavier than disappointment. Realization. After that night, silence settled between us like a wall neither of us spoke about, but both of us felt. Weeks passed without calls, without messages, without excuses. I learned to live inside that silence. At first it was painful. It felt like learning to breathe with one lung. But slowly, the silence became peaceful. I reorganized my house. I donated old things. I threw away memories I no longer needed. Then I repainted the room Daniel had once slept in. For the first time, I chose colors that I liked, not colors chosen to please a child who had now become almost a stranger. Every brushstroke felt like reclaiming territory. In quiet moments, guilt tried to creep in. It whispered that a mother should always give, always forgive, always sacrifice. But I reminded myself that giving without limits had brought me to this point. Somewhere far away, Daniel was learning the cost of choices he had once made so easily. His marriage, once displayed like a trophy, began to crack under its own weight. The woman he had married admired power more than partnership, control more than care. Arguments became routine, money turned into a weapon. And slowly, Daniel realized something he had never understood before. The same attitude he had used against his mother was now being used against him. Every fight echoed my words in his mind, words he had once dismissed as emotional manipulation. Late at night, sitting alone in his apartment, Daniel thought about the wedding. He remembered the way I had stood there, the way I had looked at him, the way I had walked away without begging. That memory haunted him more than any argument at home. One afternoon, Daniel showed up at my house again without warning. I noticed that he stood outside for a long time before knocking. When I opened the door, I saw hesitation in his eyes. It was something I hadn't seen since he was a child, afraid of admitting that he had made a mistake. He tried to talk casually at first. He commented on the house. He mentioned the weather. He avoided the real reason he had come. I let him speak. When he finally admitted that he was struggling, that nothing in his life felt stable anymore, I invited him inside. I listened, not as a rescuer, not as someone waiting to control his life, but as an equal. For the first time, Daniel didn't ask me for anything, and that absence of demand spoke louder than any apology. Our conversations slowly changed. He began asking questions instead of making statements. He asked how I had managed life alone for so many years, how I had stayed strong after his father's death, how I had endured loneliness without becoming bitter. I answered honestly, not romantically. I told him about fear, about exhaustion, about the nights when I nearly gave up. He realized something that changed him. Strength wasn't dominance. Strength was endurance. Each visit stripped away another layer of arrogance he didn't even know he carried. Eventually, the topic he feared most came up again: the property. This time, his voice wasn't demanding. It was cautious, almost ashamed. I told him clearly that the property was never meant to be a punishment or a reward. It was a responsibility. I explained that inheritance was not a right earned simply by birth. It was a trust earned through character. I told him that if one day I believed he was capable of protecting not just land, but people, then those papers would mean something. Until then, they were just paper. Daniel nodded. For the first time, he understood that power without values was hollow. Months later, news reached me that Daniel's marriage had officially collapsed. He didn't come running immediately. When he finally did, it wasn't for shelter, it wasn't for money, and it wasn't for the property. He came simply to sit, to talk, to reflect. He admitted that he had become someone he no longer recognized, someone who had confused control with strength. He apologized again, but this time there was no fear of losing something in return. I accepted his apology slowly and carefully, because forgiveness doesn't erase memory. Trust needs time, consistency, and humility. In the end, there was no dramatic reunion. No tears in the rain, no sudden miracle, just two adults learning how to rebuild something that had been broken by pride. I didn't win by denying Daniel the property. I won by teaching him dignity, and Daniel didn't lose his inheritance that day. He lost his entitlement and gained something far more valuable: understanding. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't destroying the person who hurt you. Sometimes it is stepping away, protecting your dignity, and allowing life to teach them the lesson you could never force them to understand. Thank you for listening to my story. I would love to know where in the world you are watching this video from. Let me know in the comments, and if you want more new stories like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching.